My name is Ahmed Young, and it's a pleasure to be on this panel with a group of distinguished and articulate and experienced individuals. I consider myself to be relatively young and somewhat new in the world of politics and the like, but I have some experiences that I think can be beneficial to not only our communities, but to our larger community as well. My name is Ahmed Young again, and I'm a former teacher. I'm currently a lawyer and an advocate. And before I go into my bio, I think it's really important because it gives this conversation a little bit more context. I think Brother Fleming gave a pretty good definition of what civic engagement is, but I have my own personal definition, and it isn't one that's shaped by any other's definition, but it's my own personal definition and understanding of what civic engagement is. And it's defined through what it means to be thoughtful and deliberate about the quality of life of your community. Now, your community could be your neighborhood, your community could be your larger city, your community could be the United States of America, your community could be the global community. But what are you doing in a thoughtful and deliberate way to impact the quality of life within that community? Now, I'll step back very quickly because that's the context in which I look at civic engagement. How am I impacting my community's quality of life? How am I making the lives of those around me better? How will I affect not only this generation, but the generation that came before me and the generation that's ahead of me? So that frames what I'll talk about very, very quickly. My foundation was based in Washington, D.C. I grew up in a household with 6 brothers and 2 sisters, where we fought, we loved, we played, but we had 2 figures that played very important roles in our lives. Most importantly, my mother and father, clearly. But my mother was my very first teacher, and she was not satisfied at all with the local schools in our community. She wanted us to have a better education. She wanted us to be exposed to all these different things, but the local school was not doing it. So my first taste of advocacy wasn't from my overt action or wasn't from anyone else's action other than my mother, who was fed up with the local schools. So she went out and she got together with all these different people and formed a school, and she got us together, and that was my first taste of advocacy. Because my mother, she sat down and said, I wanted something better for not only my children, not only for my sons and my daughters, but I wanted something better for the children around my children as well, because they're impacting the quality of life of my children as well. So that was my first taste of advocacy. Shortly after graduating from high school, I moved to Indiana, and that really changed my life. Growing up, my parents didn't sit down and say, Ahmed, you have to go to college. You know, that was the unstated expectation. And I think that's one of, please forgive me because I often go off on tangents. That's one of the issues that we have, and I think in our current society, is that we have pretty low expectations for our children. But my mother and father, they didn't overtly sit down and say, Ahmed, you're going to college. That was the unstated expectation. So I moved to Bloomington, Indiana for undergrad, where I studied education, and I shortly became a teacher thereafter. And I started teaching high school and middle school social studies, where I taught high school geography, history, and other humanities. And I enjoyed it, and I did that for the next 7 years. But there was something missing there. There was something that was still yearning inside of me that I wasn't really tapping into, and I felt the need to change gears somewhat. So after 7 years of teaching, I decided to pursue a legal education, and that legal education opened up a world of opportunity for me, and that was probably one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, was to pursue this legal education. While in law school, I was involved in a litany of organizations, and one of the most profound organizations that I was involved in was a political campaign, surprisingly. And that political campaign was the mayor's race in Indianapolis, Indiana. And though it wasn't a successful political race for that candidate, it was very, very successful for me, because I had the opportunity to travel the entire city from the far northwest side to the far southeast side, and I got to know the city. I got to know the issues that were prevalent. I had the opportunity to understand and meet so many different people and to understand their way of thinking, because their way of thinking was completely different to my way of thinking and my worldview. So I was engaged in all these different conversations about ways to impact the quality of life of my community members. And I enjoyed that experience. And that led me to the prosecutor's office in Marion County, where I was a deputy prosecutor, where I worked my way up from child support cases to almost working major felonies, and seeing the impact victims and getting that satisfaction of getting a guilty verdict on someone who actually committed a crime that changed their quality of life in a negative way. And that experience led me to the law firm of Bose, McKinney and Evans, where I practice law, and I'm also a lobbyist for our public affairs group. And with the public affairs group, I'm able to leverage a lot of those relationships that I built up through the campaign and through my community service work, and allow me to advocate for my clients at the state house, at the local level, and at the federal level. It's pretty exciting work that I do, but it all centers back to how do I impact the quality of life of my family and those around me and my community. And I'm enjoying that process. And there are a lot of different issues that we're facing in social media and all the different social networking sites. You have, it started with Occupy Wall Street, honestly, that really took it to a new level, you know, where we had these youth and these upset and angry individuals who are unsatisfied with the current climate, whether it's political or financial, that they're being left aside and pushed aside. And how do we make sure our voices are heard? You know, and it comes through understanding not only what the issues are, but who are the decision makers at the state, local, and federal level. We have a big election coming up in 2016, but that's where all the attention goes. All the attention goes to 2016. In 2015, at least in Indianapolis, Indiana, we have a municipal election where the city, county council, and the mayor will be elected. Those individuals are making decisions that will affect your lives day to day. Now, I won't discount the importance of the federal election because it's very important, but at the same time, like Brother Fleming said at the very beginning, all politics is local, all politics. So when you're sitting down thinking about how can I impact the number of streetlights that I have in my neighborhood that will impact public safety, that will impact the viability of me being able to set up a small business in my community, those are things that you have to think about when you're thinking about civic engagement and making sure that you're developing relationships that indeed he talked about, not just relationships when you need something, but developing real, genuine relationships before you need something, where you can sit down with your local alderman, where you can sit down with your city county person and say, hey, my name is Ahmed Young, and I'm your constituent, and you need to listen to me. That's the kind of voice that we need to make sure that we're having on a regular basis, not just when a young black male is shot down in the street, not just when someone is choked out in the street. We need to make sure that we have our voices heard early on in the process, and not just on the tail end when we're upset and angry. So I'm looking forward to your questions and engaging this conversation in ways that we can really strengthen our community, not just here in Chicago, Indianapolis, or in DC, but throughout the country as well. So thank you.
So we've traveled from Chicago to Indiana. Let's go a little bit further east to Washington, D.C. Brother Ahmed.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure to be here at the monasteries of the Anglo-Muslim Convention here in Chicago. Really the heart, the historic center of the African American, the historic center of the Muslim American experience, first and foremost, with a strong presence in the foundation of the African Muslim experience. I want to say first, I want to thank you for the previous work by me, but I want to say particularly the words that were out there. My presentation pretty much just identified what you said. Very powerful, what you laid out, the role, the public engagement, civic engagement. So I just want to make a little more texture to it, but I really work with the important role that Muslim American plays when you engage with officials at the local level. My name is John Sullivan. First and foremost, I'm here, we have our local people on the Hill. I'm the Government Affairs representative in the Public Affairs Department of Islamic Relief USA at our national office in Washington, D.C. Who's here familiar with Islamic Relief or CR signs? And maybe you did give each other a donation. Thank you so much. God bless you. Islamic Relief is the nation's largest Muslim organization. Approximately 110 staff nationwide, 7 offices across the country, and a budget of $65 million. The program for investment international. Again, I want to thank you for that $65 million because of your donations, that you put your mind, your trust in us to fulfill your obligation of law to help us with need. So we're working hard through the program on food security, hunger. I'm sorry, I'm a public security being trapped in the podium. It's really You know, not natural from my child, to this little movie here. But yeah, obviously, food security, hunger, poverty, domestically and internationally. But I'm going to focus on doing work in the context of global food security, domestically, and what I've done domestically. I have the privilege of representing this august institution organization, meeting, making relations with the White House, the executive departments such as Health and Human Services, Department of Agriculture, State Department, and so forth, and I maintain our relationships. We look forward, all lives, our relationships with members of Congress. On an annual basis, I keep relationships with meetings with about 50 members of Congress on the Foreign Affairs Committee, on the Agricultural Committee, on the Health and Human Services Committee, and so forth. That we can address really rich nation to say, I would help that child here in the city of Chicago or that child in Mogadishu who's starving. That's what I'm representing. We provide primary support programs that help people, but because I believe it's unique in the sense compared to various other post-secondary organizations that have a government affairs department. We actually have HCAS, that means we're registered with the IRS as a lobbying organization and have presence in Washington, D.C. Because ultimately we know all of our government, all the donations we give, but we are not going to food pantry our way out in hunger in America. We want to thank everyone who takes initiatives to start a food pantry, who creates a shelter, who runs a social service organization here in Chicago and across the country. But ultimately, we know as Americans, as Muslims, as taxpayers, that our organizations already operate in our, they're not going to sustain in hunger and poverty in America, to make sure that the U.S. government is not maintaining its position, funding these programs, such as food stamps, waivers, after-school programs. And I just hunger issues for the lost issues. Make sure we maintain Social Security, Obamacare, as long as it's promoting the role. I'm laying out what we do because I'm giving you the good right now. I'm giving you the positive on Muslim Americans, the work that I do, when I go out, and I try to represent really the values, the kitchen table issues that your neighbors are talking about and concerned about in Washington, D.C. That's good. I'm happy with it. I'll continue to do that. And even more important, I'm looking for how I and hospitals can connect with the coalition of the governments, with the taxpayers, to bring in your voices to many at your local centers, at your local organizations where you're addressing these issues in our community, to raise these voices up in Washington, D.C. How our community, how our community, the African-American community is engaging with these. That's the important. What about the next plan? I just came from a meeting this morning, actually, at that other convention that they have across town. This is where we got 35,000 Muslims showing up. We had a panel this morning. I'm privileged enough where I get invited to government relations breakfast with people from various government agencies with 50 Muslim American leaders. I had to go out to this meeting this morning. Because I saw that room is not tolerable. House up. God bless us who came from the Department of State, represented by what's going on over in some other countries that I'm sure we're very concerned about what's going on in Syria. No doubt, and Muslims were concerned about the crisis. And we have people from the Department of Justice. We have many Muslim sisters told to take off the scarf when they work at Walmart, and they have the right to be represented and have the right to protect them. What I have to say in that meeting was, how important those issues are, these are not the issues that most Americans and most Muslim Americans are engaged with or dealing with on a day-to-day level. And when it's not only about people from the organization versus foreign issues in the United States and civil liberties, no matter how important those are, I'm like, what about the 46 million Americans who hunger every month? You want to believe that Muslim Americans are part of that group? What about the Muslim Americans who are living with possible food intake, paying rent? About to go bankrupt because they don't have out there, you can sit. These issues outside